Our bedroom stale air was thick with unsaid grudges. It had become a nightly routine for us to have a silent avoidance ballet as Ellie looked through her phone on hers. I pretended to sleep on my side of the bed. The smirk that had taken across her face was illuminated by a knowing, smug grin that makes a guy who fears the worst but holds out hope that he might be mistaken feel a twinge of guilt. I was not mistaken. The life we had built had been slowly and agonizingly falling apart over the last 6 months. A misplaced phone charger that wasn't ours but belonged to a brand I didn't recognize and had been hidden away in the drawer next to Ellie's side of the bed, a drawer she always kept meticulously organized out of a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity, was the final brushstroke that broke the illusion of normalcy. All of the stolen glances, the hushed phone calls made in the other room, and the increasingly frequent business trips that never quite added up painted a picture that I had tried desperately to ignore. I had waited until Ellie was taking a shower that morning and picked up her phone, a device that felt strange in my hand, praying that I wouldn't find anything because my intuition had been correct. However, the pictures were there, concealed in a newly made album that contained pictures of Ellie with another man, not a client or a business associate, in a variety of bars and restaurants. Their heads were closed, their faces were bright with a happiness I hadn't seen on Ellie's in a long time. The worst part wasn't just the obvious betrayal, it was the look on her face, that genuine laughter, the complete lack of reservation, or any concern for me. She appeared content, which I had ostensibly failed to provide, which is why I was now pretending to sleep as my world silently unfolded around me. I could hear her gentle giggles as she scrolled, with the occasional snort breaking up the otherwise quiet room. At last, I made the decision to act, gently rolling over to pretend to wake up from a light dose. "Hey," I said, my voice thick with faint drowsiness. "What's so funny?" Ellie jumped, startled, but quickly collected herself. "Oh, nothing, just some memes." She tried hesitantly to cover her screen, but the smoke was still visible, and a mocking challenge edged her features. "Oh, I see." I put my hand out, and she hesitated for a split second before grudgingly turning the phone to face me. I pretended to scroll through the same pictures she had just been looking at, acting amused, and then I turned it over and placed the display in front of her. Her face changed instantly, the smirk disappeared, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated horror. Her eyes widened, her breath caught, and the phone trembled in her hands. It seemed as though she had seen the Megasa and been turned to stone. This reaction was exactly what I had been waiting for, and I didn't let her off the hook or give her an opportunity to make up a ridiculous lie. As I spoke, I kept the phone facing her and saw something strange about Ellie. "Examine that picture of you in the restaurant with the red boots more closely. Look past your happy face and past the man's attempt to hide how foolish he appears." She stared, her eyes darting back and forth as she tried to understand what was being said about her breath-hampered gaze at the reflection of Ellie. I said, my voice low and dangerous, the gentle tone gone. I tapped the screen on the reflection behind her, visible in the shiny surface of the water cooler that stood awkwardly next to the booth. Notice anything familiar? Her eyes widened. She leaned closer to the screen, her lips moving silently. A slow flush crept up her neck, spreading across her cheeks as she finally realized what I was pointing out. There in the corner of the reflection, almost hidden, was a figure standing in the aisle behind her. It was my reflection, or rather the top of my head, just visible above the other patrons, and in my hand, clearly visible, was a phone. Not a smartphone, it was my old flip phone, the one I used for work because of the battery life. A phone that was so outdated that she barely registered it when she saw it with me. The full weight of my meticulous preparation hit her then. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that I hadn't just stumbled upon her secret. I had been aware for weeks, or perhaps months. I had been silently watching, collecting evidence and building my case. She wasn't just caught, she was exposed. You knew, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded while grinning icily, almost like a predator. "Ellie, was what I did. I've known you for a long time, and you continued acting like I was a fool, didn't you? You were so smart and meticulous, making sure everything looked nice, but you overlooked one small detail, didn't you?" Her eyes were watering, and her lips were quivering. I had waited for this and had fantasized about it, but seeing her in this state didn't make me happy. Instead, it made me feel grimly satisfied. How could you have let her whimper? Her arrogance was vanished, and in its place was an awkward fragility. I could have erupted in rage, yelled accusations, or even slashed out physically, but that wasn't how I was going to handle it. I had spent the previous few weeks planning the ideal response, a cold, calculated reaction meant to cut her to her core. "You have to be kidding, Ellie. After what you've done, You think I'm going to let you turn this around? This isn't about your feelings, Ellie. She tried to touch me, her hand reaching out, but I flinched as if I were on fire. I said, my voice like ice, don't touch me, don't even look at me, you disgust me. I had never spoken to her with such venom, and I had never been able to be so angry, but her actions had changed me, chipping away at me. I got up and walked to my closet to get the little suitcase I had packed the night before. I'm leaving, I murmured in an emotionless voice. A lawyer has already been consulted. You will receive divorce papers before the end of the week, and I will take everything away from you. You will be left with nothing, which is what you deserve. You may have laughed at me in those photos, but I promise you won't be laughing when this is over. She attempted to object, offered an explanation, and apologized, but her words were lost in the abrupt void of my detachment. The cocky, self-assured woman I had married had vanished, replaced by a terrified, whining shell. I turned away. I walked out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, and out of her life. I never once looked back. As I walked down the corridor, I finally felt it, relief, pure unadulterated relief. My hands were trembling, but they weren't trembling with anger anymore. They were trembling with freedom. I had been in a cage of her making, and now finally the cage was broken. Later I would learn that she'd called and begged for forgiveness. She said it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, that she didn't know why she did it. She had even gone to the man, but he'd shut her out the moment he learned. I knew she'd lost everything, her marriage, her reputation, and even her lover. I didn't care. I didn't have a triumphant ending. I wasn't healed, and I wasn't suddenly okay, but I had the satisfaction of knowing that I had protected myself, that I had not given in to her lies. And as I drove out of the parking lot of the apartment for the last time, a single thought kept repeating itself: I was free, and that was enough.